In this lecture, let us quickly check out what are the different hand tools which are commonly used in sheet metal. So the purpose of hand tool is to convert the raw material into a finished product. As we have seen in the earlier video that there are machinery which are commonly used for conversion of the raw material into a finished product. Apart from that, for minor applications, we can manually create the sheet metal products. So in order to convert the raw material into a finished product, we require certain tools. And in this lecture, we will be discussing few of them in detail. So I've written the total list of the total list of tools which are commonly used. Let us quickly look at them in a very quicker note. Clear? So I'll just go to the next slide. The first one is the measuring tools. The measuring tool name itself tells us that the tools which are used to measure the dimensions. Clear? As we generally require the sheet metal for a purpose or a specific application, so the requirements are basically considered based on the dimensions. I mean, for example, we have the raw material which is available in the form of roll, and I require a 20 by 20 mm of sheet or 100 by 100 mm of sheet or any random dimension sheet. So how do I cut it? So I have to utilize a scale first or a measuring tool such as steel rule, folding rule, steel circumference rule, or swing blade protractor. So these are the common measuring tools which help us to draw a layout on the raw material, and then on the layout we can use the cutting tools to cut out the raw material, which can be later folded or bent into a required product. So the first one is the steel rule. We are pretty aware of it. Since our childhood, we are basically using the steel rules, especially in schools. And then we have the folding rules. This is a little bit lengthier than the common conventional steel rule. And this has hinges at the edges, which are basically helping it to fold and reduce its total length. After that, we have the circumference rule over here, which is used to directly find out the circumference of circular components. So circumference is nothing but the perimeter of cylindrical or circular surfaces or components. Clear? So this is the circumference rule. It is having a kind of foldability, or the material is like it can easily twist around the circular surfaces. After that, we have the protractor, which is basically commonly used for marking and measuring different angles. After these measuring tools, we have more advanced tools, such as vernier calipers. Then we have the micrometer. So vernier calipers and micrometers are commonly used to measure up to the accuracy of 0.02 mm for vernier calipers and 0.01 mm for the micrometer caliper. So this can measure a very minor dimensions as well. So these are very accurate. Actually, the precision level is very high for these two calipers. Then after that, we have the thickness gauge. Basically, it is also called as slip gauge, and it is used to measure the clearance between different parts during assemblies. Actually, so there are plenty of blades which are attached, which are nothing but gauges. Actually, each of the gauges having its own thickness. So whenever there is a assembling in the sense the joining of different components together, so wherever there is a clearance between different parts, we can just insert each of the blade and see which blade fits tightly or loosely or cannot fit. So the blade or the gauge which is fitting appropriately exactly without any gap, we can say that is the thickness between, or that is the clearance gap between the two assembled components. After that, we have the sheet metal gauge. As I mentioned you in the previous video, this is used to measure the thickness of the sheet. So the higher the number, the thinner the sheet. I said you can see over here 1 2 3 4 5. You can see the gap over here. 1 is having so much gap. Similarly, for the number 2, it is reducing. Number 3, it is reducing again. Similarly, the numbers are going up to 30s, and you can see the thickness is reducing. So what we can do is we can take the raw material of sheet metal and insert into the gauge and see which gauge has the proper which gauge actually easily fits the sheet metal what we are having. It shouldn't be loose, it shouldn't be extremely tight. It should be just kind of interference between the gauge and the metal. So that is the basic sheet metal gauge. So after this tools, The next hand tool is the straight edge. So it is a flat steel bar and it is beveled, it is having beveled edges. So basically this kind of straight edge is using for drawing lines, straight lines, or which are basically used for marking the layouts on the sheet metal. Okay, if we are having to draw a straight line, so we can either use a steel rule, but this is having beveled edges, it is easy to handle it, and then we can just try to place it on the sheet metal and use a scriber to scribe the layout, to draw a layout. After that we have the tri-square or steel square, we can call it. It is basically used to measure the perpendicularness or the 90 degrees. We can just measure with this and we can just mark an exact 90 degrees line or a perpendicular line on the sheet metal. And we have the scriber, which is a marking tool. Basically we can call it as marking tool. So scriber has a pointed tip at the edges. You can see over here there is a pointed tip and there is a pointed tip over here and here. So this knurling, basically we can call it, it is a grip for holding the scriber, and the name itself it scribes on the sheet metal. So we can just use the sheet metal to scribe on it. Basically the purpose of scribing is to marking or drawing a layout on which we can cut the sheet metal and then perform the required operations. In similar note, we have different marking tools such as trammel points and divider. So you must be aware of divider. Trammel points are also used for marking, and these are especially used for marking circular arcs or parallel lines. Like you can fix the distance between these 2 points, and for example, there is a limit of a divider. It cannot extend up after some distance. Okay, so in that particular cases, trammel points can be used. Like if, for example, if you want to maintain a distance of say 30 centimeter, okay, so you want to draw 2 parallel lines which are having a distance of 30 centimeter. So you can mark, you can measure and tighten them at a distance of 30 centimeter gap, and using a straight edge you can just draw a line, and you'll be getting 2 parallel lines which are having a distance of 30 millimeters. So this is a trammel point basically. And after that we have punches. Punches are again used for marking, and we can it is having a pointed or a blunt shape. Over here we have different types of punches: prick punch, center punch, hand lever punch. So what we do is we just take the punch, and if we want to, for example, after the marking is being completed, before directly cutting it, it is generally advised to dent the sheet metal on the layout, that is on the what do we call the layout which is used for cutting off the material actually. So on that particular layout we can use the center punch or a dot punch, and we can just hammer it from the top, and you'll be getting dents on the marking. Then it will be easy for us to cut. So that is the purpose of punching and all. And after that we have chisels. These are material removal tools basically, and it is used for cutting the sheets, and it is used for chipping operations basically. And you're probably aware of this, so I need not discuss much about it. Then there comes the hammers, and we have riveting hammer, setting hammer, and raising hammer for different purposes. So raising hammer is basically used for forming of a flat sheet metal into a curved or hollow shape like a spoon. Okay, so that is the purpose of raising hammer. Then we have the setting hammer. It is used for setting down the edge while making a double seam. So I mentioned you about seam in the previous video, that seaming is generally used for connecting to sheet metal by overlapping them at the edges. After overlapping them, we can take a setting hammer and just hammer it so that it becomes very strong and it settles in an intact way actually. Okay, so this is about hammers. And the next one is a mallet. Mallet is a very soft hammer. It is made up of rubber generally. Then comes the important tool which is used for cutting the sheet metal or shearing the sheet metal, we can say, and this is called as snip. So it is generally very similar to a scissor. Like you will be having 2 holding handles over here. You can just hold it in a similar fashion as you are holding a scissor. The difference between them is the blade what we have. This blade is actually used for cutting the metals, but a scissor cannot cut a metal. Okay, maybe it can cut, but it is not strong enough to handle the sheet metals. Okay, so snip is a very strong scissor, you can tell, and it is used for cutting the sheet metals. Then comes the stakes. These are supporting tools if you are probably aware of anvils, you can just Google and check. Anvils are basically used in forging workshops. Like, it is a very strong supporting tool on which we can keep the solid material and hammer it. It just takes or absorbs the load when we are hammering it. So these are kind of anvils which can be easily handled actually. Generally anvil is very heavy, but these are little lighter weight because you can see the design over here. And the different shapes of anvil help us to perform different operations. Like, we have this funnel like shape. So what we can do is we can just keep the sheet metal on the top of it. Sheet metal is flat generally, and we can start hammering it from the top. So once we are continuously hammering from the top, what will happen is the sheet metal will acquire the shape of this funnel. On a similar fashion, we can, if we are wanting to bend it at 90 degrees, we can use this kind of stake. And we have different stakes again. And basically these are nothing but use the supporting tool and forming tools, we can just tell. Okay, then comes the cutting pliers, which are used for holding, bending and cutting works. After that, we have the groovers, which are used for grooves and flattening of seams. So this is a seam. You can see that the seam is having certain thickness, and if we are using a groover, we can actually place it exactly on the seam and hammer it from the top. So they flatten the seam actually and make it more intact. Then we have the rivet set, basically used for creating a rivet bolt at that particular location of joint especially. So these are the hand tools what we have commonly present in the sheet metal workshop basically. Now let us move forward and continue.